and now you can have that assembled almost anywhere, which means you can flat pack things. And that's actually a brilliant innovation that's starting to allow assembly to occur in markets. So you can ship things to India, have them assembled there, and then shipped within country, which saves ridiculous amounts of inefficiency in the current supply chain management systems. So those are sort of decentralizations that we're looking at that actually we said this is powerful. But energy is one of the most interesting ones, mainly because energy was the most concentrated. Has anybody ever heard of a scale, like a grid scale operation that wasn't government backed or involved? I think we're still looking too. I haven't seen one yet. So almost every grid that you look at, here you're going to look at, you say we're N-Star, or your Con Edison or whatever, but all of those are government-backed organizations. Those were all funded and started initially as state-owned enterprises. And they're still sort of pseudo-state in a lot of sense. They're heavily regulated by a state entity, and so what that says is what they can and can't do, how they can grow, and et cetera. It also means how much energy they can produce and how much energy they can push down channels. In the US, we actually have a massive grid scale, and so we're pretty okay. In Africa, what that means is that over 80% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa does not connect to a grid. They do not have the ability to connect to a grid. In most cases, they're either too remote from where the grid ends. In other cases, it's too expensive for them to drop the cable down to be able to actually tie their house in. So that means that when they walk into their home at night, they have to light a candle or light a kerosene torch, or they have to plug something into a car battery. When that car battery drains, they got to pick that thing up, drag it down the street, and pay somebody to charge it for them, probably with a diesel generator, unless somebody has a grid tie down the road and they can charge it. Charging that battery and taking it back home, buying candles and paying kerosene is going to use up to almost 50% of their disposable income. So you can imagine if every month you worked and N-Star bill came in and 50% of your money went out the door on N-Star. You'd be pretty pissed off, I'm sure. It also, what it does is it really depresses the economy. Because as you know, you can walk down the street here, especially actually on Huntington, it's even better, and you can see sort of the vibrance of you guys having more money than you need. Right? Pizza shops, bars, sports teams, all of that happens mostly because we have excess cash. That actually creates jobs, which generates wealth, it creates businesses, improves real estate values, it starts to cycle cash through the economy. If you're not spending that money on other things because it's all going to something that's relatively overly priced and inefficient, then you're going to depress that whole economy. So the impact of actually decentralizing production in some cases is pretty massive. In the case of energy, we don't think that there's anywhere it's actually bigger. If we can decentralize energy production and we can have private companies providing energy at a household level that's affordable and billable in a way that most people can handle the payments, then not only can we provide energy access to the 1.5 billion people that don't have it currently, but we can also dramatically improve the economies in which these people live and work because they can become more productive at home. Education rates will go up. We all know that education is a huge factor in GDP. And they will spend less of their money on things that they need and more on things that they want. Also, they'll be able to improve savings. And savings is great because, as you all know, you can leverage savings in order to buy a house, in order to buy a car, big ticket items. Those things are very, very important for an economy. So we look at energy not only from the aspect of what's the simple basic thing of once you turn on lights in a house, it's safer, kids can read, people can come up with productive uses for it, but also in a general overall economic standpoint, it's going to dramatically improve the economy of the area. And so we invest heavily in energy, solar energy, distributed energy sources such as like battery swapping. And some of our companies, is there on that computer, some of our companies, you can just go to the portfolio pages. If you go, look in the portfolio. And I'll show you just kind of an example of a lot of the companies that we're investing in because I think they kind of tell the story pretty well. Yeah, no, that's perfect. You can just leave it there. So, Egg Energy, I'll kind of talk from back here. See if I can see it. Egg Energy is a company that has been called the Netflix of batteries. They work out of Tanzania. The model's changed more recently, but the Netflix of batteries is still catchy and kind of fun to say. So what they did, and they actually came up with a really brilliant model, they said most people live actually pretty close to the grid. It's not abutting the grid, they can't connect to the grid, but they're not that far away. It's called the last mile, right? It's that mile beyond, right? And that's a big issue in distribution, especially in energy. And so how do you get energy out to those people that are just a mile out? And they came up with this brilliant idea of, we're gonna build charging centers, we're gonna charge a whole bunch of batteries, and then we're gonna take them to the people's houses, and they can pay a subscription fee, and when the battery's depleted, they just swap it for a new battery. Like the Netflix, pre-Netflix streaming, I don't know if you guys actually did that one too, where you used to have to mail back the DVDs. So when that's the same model, you would come back in and literally these people, they take a battery, these guys string a light up in your house, they put a socket on your wall and a light switch, and there's a little tiny battery. It's about this big. It's branded egg, it's really bright orange, it's kind of their color. And then that battery, you pay for a subscription fee, and every time you need a refill on your battery, every time your lights start to dim out, you pop that battery out, you walk it down the street, and they swap you for a new one, you give them a couple shillings, and you move on. It's a great model. Actually really works pretty well. There's reasons for the adjustment, mostly business reasons. A lot of times when you're trying to help the poor, there's not enough money in there to build a margin on the business, and so that's been an adjustment there. But that was a great example of how do you deliver energy in a decentralized way. Another one up there is Simpa Network. Simpa has also been a success in our portfolio. They work in India, eggs in Tanzania. In India, the big issue you have not only is lack of electricity, but even in urban areas, really densely populated areas, people don't own their land outright, and so they cannot. No one will come in and put an electrical wire down to them, and so there's got to be a way that you could do something where if they had to move, if something happened, you could move the system out. And so what these guys came up with was this pay-as-you-go model, essentially mimicking the cell phone. Cell phones, when you're in emerging markets, you buy a couple minutes at a time, and then you top up your phone and you use it. It's not like here where you pay at the end. You always go and you buy a SIM card and you say, here, give me $10 worth of credits. They put those credits on your phone. You use it until it's exhausted. That's the reason that cell phones have been so successful, is because that model actually works really well with people who don't have a lot of money or they have very interrupted cash flows. Simpa Networks just took that and said, let's do that for solar energy. And so now you go with Simpa Networks, you get a solar home system, which is a solar panel, a battery pack, light switches, lights, all of that, and a meter on there. And you go to the store and you pay for energy, you buy essentially watts of energy, and you get a text message with a code on it. You punch that code into your meter, and it gives you that many credits. When you're done with your credits, you gotta go buy another code, and you bid, and then you get more. So as you use more, you pay more. But that's a way that it allows people to sort of live within the confines within their comfortable economic confines, and still be able to afford power. Again, very hard business model, mostly because they have to pay for the system up front, which means you have to borrow money. And when you borrow money and your customers pay you back at a variable rate, it becomes very difficult to make sure that you cover your loans. So that's a great example. Both those companies are great examples of models that when you look at it on its head, the impact is amazing. The business models are actually very bright, really creative, extraordinarily smart people working in a market that is so damn hard to work in, that even with all of that going, they struggle mightily to actually do it. And in cases of egg, they've had to completely change the model. They're no longer the Netflix of batteries, they're actually doing solar home system financing as well. There's a reason for that. Some of the other companies that we looked at, Promethean Power is a company that I think was mentioned in this course. Promethean Power actually is a Boston-based company that came up with an idea of doing solar milk chilling. This is also another great example of how you have to adapt as a business, and you have to look at the market that you're in and understand it. So solar milk chilling, milk in India is a huge product, massive. They produce more milk than almost anywhere other than New Zealand. So it's pretty amazing how much, and yet they still import milk because of the demand. When cows are sacred, you got lots of cows, you better use them for something, right? So milk became a huge product in India, and it still is ceremonially, it's massive, as well as it's also just, very popular. Problem is, getting milk from rural places, I don't know, how many of you guys have been to India? All right, it's hot, and I'm not kidding, it's really, really hot. India is a really hot place. And so you take all of these, you take rural milk collection, and you put it in essentially an aluminum jar. It's about this big, it's round like that. You put that in there and you go and you try to carry that when it's 105 degrees outside. You try to carry that to a market and get it there before that milk spoils. It just rarely happens. It's really tough. And the worst part about it, once you get it to that place, they weigh it, they check the fat, they pay you for it, and then they dump it into another huge container that's also made of metal, and then they wait for a truck to come. And that process can usually take somewhere between 8 to 12 hours. So that milk, by the time it gets to the processing plant, so much of it is spoiled. And it's spoiled to an extent, right? So, cheese is spoiled milk, right? There's ways that you can spoil milk, there's ways you can't spoil milk. The problem with milk when it spoils is that it starts to eat into the fat content. Low fat content milk isn't considered very good for making high-end products. So in India, you have paneer instead of cheese, right? It's kind of low quality cheese. It's delicious when they cook it, but it's not exactly something that you can make a high margin on. It's really common. So dairies in India, we're looking at how do we get into making better cheeses? How do we get into making ice creams and yogurts, things that required better quality, higher fat content milk? And one of the big things was they had to start to chill that milk at the base when they collected it. But most of those places were off-grid. The places that are off-grid, one of the things you can do is put a diesel generator. Diesel generators are a great solution. There's really almost nothing that packs a punch nearly as good as diesel. It's tremendously dense in energy. So it's a great thing. It's really efficient. Problem is, it's dirty. An even bigger problem for the dairies is that people steal it constantly. So anywhere you put a diesel generator, you think, oh, I better watch out for the generator. Now, generators are pretty heavy. No one's going to really take that. But what they will take is that diesel all day long because it's easy to sell. It's easy to carry, easy to sell. So you have to pay for some guard or someone there to be there. So these guys came up with this model of, hey, let's build a solar system that can chill milk. Really kind of great idea, but the problem is, again, you run into this market where you can't afford to have a solar system. A dairy collection site is a tin hut. So you're going to put 500-watt solar panels on the roof of a tin hut. It's not going to work. So they had to scale down 4 years of development. Smart MIT guys, really brilliant engineers, had to spend 4 years to develop the technology to a point where it actually fit the market. And the market still involves a diesel generator in a lot of cases. But that diesel generator now uses very little energy. It only cools for a few minutes, and then the technology stores that cold energy for a long time. What they've developed in the end is what we call a cold storage battery. And that cold storage battery has a million uses around the world. They're already starting to develop it for fruits and vegetables. But what it did and what it's doing right now is revolutionizing dairy collection in India, which is going to dramatically enhance the profits that dairies make. And so we look at this and say, well, where's the impact on the farmer? And for us, we say, look at it and say, if the dairies make money, they buy more milk. They buy more milk from farmers at a better price too, because the higher quality the milk, the higher the margin the dairy makes. Dairies are competitive. They always want to get more milk, so they start to pay more. And we've already seen it with the dairy that Promethean's working with. We've already seen how they've said that as quality of milk goes up, they're paying more per liter of milk to the farmers that they collected. So we're going to have this impact that's going to spread across there. So those are a couple examples of the portfolio companies. I'm trying to think of another one that would be really good to think about. Some of the portfolio companies that we invest in, we're also investors, and investors like to take long shots every once in a while. You like to say, hey, this is probably not going to work, but it could be the next Google. And so some of our investments are in that one, in TBT, which is a piezoelectric technology. Piezoelectrics are a technology that when you apply pressure or bend it, it creates an electrical current. Essentially, it does two things. It either converts electricity into a physical energy, so it creates it into something like a physical movement, or it creates physical movement. It takes physical movement and it creates it into electricity. Both are energy. It's just a different application of energy. So we looked at this and said, how do you exchange the rent of cell phones? How do you keep people who are off grid and moving around a lot? How do you keep them on their cell phones in rural markets, in particular in Africa? And one of the solutions that we looked at was piezoelectrics, the ability to harness the movement of a person in order to generate enough current to charge a cell phone. We knew it was a long shot. The technology is now being used in the backup camera of a Mercedes-Benz. So I'm not really sure the impact that we're going to